Hello, 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 and welcome. And thank you for joining us. It's absolutely amazing that you've taken the time out today. So, my name is Natasha Hilton, and I am one of the strategic leads for Women Ed. And my job today is just to give you a really quick summary of what Women Ed is. So I'm sure you're aware that Women Ed is a global network of mainly women that are here to support each other is the summary. We are 19 countries. There are 30 networks within those 19 countries. There are, I think, over 35,000 people following on Twitter. So there are loads and loads and loads of women within the group that are either aspiring leaders or existing leaders, and we work together to give support, like I've mentioned, to each other. So there are loads of events booked throughout the year. Obviously during this time loads of them are done virtually, but during those events women usually share their stories. They're there to give support, so it might be support with creating CVs or I don't know, interviews, techniques, etc. You just join via Twitter and just look at all the other women that are there following. There's lots and lots and lots of inspiring stories. There are lots of sharing of great information, sharing of advice, just on teaching and learning sometimes, and sometimes it is on leadership. So I just want to welcome you again and just say it's a really, really amazing group of women that get together virtually at the moment. Hopefully we can do some live events and are here to support and mentor and coach. So it was, I suppose, the reason I joined and how I got involved, and I hope to see lots and lots of you in the future. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here today, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Bye.
Good evening, everyone. As Beck said, I'm Nicola Nelson, and it's brilliant to be here. And as a self-confessed victim of imposter syndrome, I must admit that I don't really know why anyone would want to listen to what I have to say, but it is a privilege to be here. And thank you to this amazing group of ladies who have launched Women Ed here in Malaysia, and Bex in particular, for inviting me to speak tonight. I hope that something I say tonight resonates with you and helps you on your personal journey. So as Beck said, I am the primary principal at Garden International School here in Kuala Lumpur, where I've been for just a short time, since August 2019. And I live here with my husband, who doesn't currently do any paid work. Let's get straight to it. And I want to start by addressing the title of this presentation. When I wrote that title, I was trying to capture the message that I wanted to give here tonight. And it's a message that I feel so strongly about, because I truly believe that as a woman in leadership, I have a responsibility to make the path easier for those who come after me. I'm going to be 50 years old later this year, and with the benefit of 26 years of professional hindsight, I want to share with you some of the lessons I've learned, the barriers I've faced and overcome, and how I think that women and men need to understand the challenges that women face and how to support them. I want you to keep this quote in mind whilst I talk a little bit about my journey. For all of us, there are times when we want to give up. Life rarely works out the way that we planned it, and how we keep moving forwards is about how we perceive those difficult moments and what we decide to do with the power that we all have to use the barriers as a way to learn and succeed. I grew up in the UK in a relatively poor working class household with an alcoholic father, but with a mum who recognised that education was important. I was very determined to get to a point in my life where I had choices. I saw and was told that the way to have this was by doing well at school. As I will go on to explain, things did not go to plan, and a significant life event for me was becoming a single parent at the age of 25. A situation I was totally unprepared for, a situation I knew went against everything my parents had wanted for me, and something that changed the course of my life. My son is a blessing, but as a driven, determined young woman with a plan, being a single parent was not what I had expected, and it was not what was expected of me. Even in 1998, stereotypes around single mothers were still very unflattering, and I felt ashamed about my situation. Throughout school, big things were expected of me. I was the only person from my school and the first person from my family to go to university. I was a musician and I played the guitar, the cello, the piano from the age of 8. I was head girl at secondary school. I taught guitar lessons to younger students. I worked really hard at school and I got good exam results. I was offered places at a number of prestigious universities, including Cambridge, but eventually I chose to go to the University of York to study music, with every intention of becoming either a commercial composer or a concert guitarist. At university, something really clicked when I realised that I could help children to change their life chances in the way that education had changed mine. So I changed direction after my first degree and I went on to do a PGCE in music at Leeds University. As you can see, my journey between 1994, when I began teaching, and now has included some interesting twists and turns. My son was born in Jordan, and shortly after, my first marriage broke down, and my then husband chose not to be a part of my son's life. To this day, he has never met my son Michael, who is now 22. I returned to the UK with a 3-month-old. I had no money, no job, and it was quite honestly one of the most traumatic experiences of my life up until that point. I adored my son, but I felt like a complete failure, thought my professional life was effectively over, and that all of the choices I'd worked so hard to give myself had now also disappeared. None of my peers were single parents or even had children, and suddenly it felt as if my big plans were over. I couldn't see a way back, but then I decided to try and see a way forward to create a different path with new goals. My previous head had tipped me off about a nearby school who were looking for a temporary music teacher. So I went for the interview and I was very careful not to tell the panel that I was a single parent of a tiny baby, because I had heard so many disparaging comments about women who had children, how they were often absent to look after their kids, they couldn't fully commit to the job, and I just thought I would be judged in the same way. I got the job, so I guess I'll never know if it would have made a difference if I'd been honest. For the following 9 years, I was highly aware of the prejudices that existed in relation to single mothers. I didn't know any single mothers. I didn't see any single mothers being promoted. So I had no reference point for that. I had to be the first one, and in my particular situation, and I decided that I wouldn't let it stop me. I remember crying when I got my job as director of sixth form of a big secondary school, because I knew it meant I could provide for my son on a different level. And as a side note, when I interviewed for that job, when Michael was 7, I still didn't tell them I was a single parent, still afraid of being discriminated against. I was then offered the opportunity to join Manchester Education Authority as a school effectiveness officer, and it was a great opportunity to learn more on a wider range of schools. And at this point in my career, my son was 9 and I met my now second husband. I discovered that I was working with primary as well as secondary schools. And after a year, I was asked to go in and be the head teacher of a primary school where the head had to leave quite suddenly. I then became the first non-Catholic head teacher of a Catholic primary school in the UK, which is a whole other story and a different talk. And then I became the head teacher of a Jewish primary school, again, a whole other talk about a community that still holds a very dear place in my heart. I left that school to become the CEO of a multi-academy trust. And after 2 years in that job, and thinking that we were empty nesters, my son came home from university and brought his girlfriend with him. My husband and I set about having plans drawn up to extend our house, to create an annex for them to live in. And then one weekend, after another exhausting week for us both at work, I floated the idea of moving to work abroad, something that had never really left me over the past 20 years. We discussed the possibility that this could improve our work-life harmonisation, with my husband not needing to have a paid job. Within 2 months, I had been offered my current job, and here I am. My son now lives in our house in the UK. We live here, and well, apart from the challenges of COVID, we are loving life in Malaysia. So let's go into some of the more details about the barriers that I had to overcome. Women have many roles. This is a quote from Caroline Perez's excellent book, Invisible Women. You may have noticed that I've said twice that my husband doesn't have any paid work here in Malaysia. He does in fact work very hard. This is what we came here out here for our work-life harmonisation. He cooks, he cleans, he shops, and he also teaches at a refugee school. However, it's amazing how many people we meet who think my husband is A, a legend because he's a man and he does all of that, or B, so lucky that he doesn't have to do a paid job and his life must be so easy. It is a fact that globally, women typically spend disproportionately more time on unpaid care work than men. This, in addition to their paid activities, creates the double burden of work for women. Sheryl Sandberg famously told women that they should lean in and have it all. And Michelle Obama said that she didn't agree with this, that actually you can't have it all at the same time. I have to admit that I see both points of view. Whilst I am a staunch advocate of women stepping up and not being prevented from advancing their careers because they chose to give birth, I experience the pull between wanting to spend precious time with my son and not wanting to step back from my career. I know that I missed key moments in my son's life because I was working, and to this day, I wrestle with that fact. But I believe that I enriched his life by providing him with a role model of a strong woman who worked to support her son and ultimately gave him opportunities he would not otherwise have had. Thank you to my colleague Jane, who arranged for some of these images on screen to be installed in some of our female bathrooms at GIS, reminding us all every day of the importance of intercultural female role models. We talk about the importance of role models for our students, but we need that too. I've had 11 jobs since 1994, including the one I'm in now. Of those 11, I have only ever had 2 female line managers. In my early career, I remember trying to emulate some of the men I saw in leadership roles and thinking, is that how I need to be if I want to have that job next? When I did get a female boss, she was a huge influence on me. And I remember feeling reassured that actually I did not have to be seen as aggressive or dramatic as a woman in charge. It is a fact that women are still playing catch up in every aspect of life, not just our professional ones. We know from data and research that women are still underrepresented, underpaid, and often put into situations in which we are actually less physically safe because the world is quite literally designed to put men first. See again Caroline Perez's brilliant book, Invisible Women, if you need more facts. It's important to say at this stage that I have worked with and continue to work with some incredibly inspiring male colleagues. But the point I am trying to make is that I am not a man. And in my years as a developing female leader, I desperately needed a female leader to aspire and look up to. Women inspiring women is an incredibly important aspect of any organisation's culture that needs to be nurtured and encouraged, which is why we're all here taking part in Women Ed, and which is why I founded and lead a Women in Leadership series at GIS. Also, please do be aware that you are a role model, even if you didn't realise it. And that's an important responsibility. So think carefully about the messages you are giving to your female and your male colleagues. You can be a role model at any age or stage of your career. Some of my role models are colleagues I work with who are much younger and less experienced than I am. Okay, so this is definitely easier said than done. I know that many of us suffer from this, and the perfectionist tendency can seriously affect our mental health. As discussed just now, as women, we have many roles and we want to do all of them well. Typically, we have more of a tendency to fear being judged if we don't than men do. I wish someone had told me when I was 18 that it is okay not to be perfect, that what other people think of me doesn't really matter. I'm almost 50 and it's still hard for me to make mistakes, to get things wrong and not fear being judged. And there are lots of reasons for that around my childhood conditioning and the conditioning of society and the media. And one of the most powerful things that has helped me is having colleagues who admit failure and mistakes in general. It's so powerful to know that someone you respect and admire is not perfect. So here are a few of the things that I'm not very good at and some of the mistakes I've made that I'm willing to own up to in public anyway. I don't know how to cook. I'm really untidy at home and I leave a lot of things to the last minute. When my son was growing up, I definitely haven't let him have too much screen time. And one time he cut his leg and I just fixed him up at home, even though I probably should have taken him to hospital to have stitches. But I was so tired, I couldn't face going to the hospital. He has a small scar on the back of his leg and I still wake up in the middle of the night and beat myself up about it. I also, more than once, forgot to take him to birthday parties he'd been invited to because I was so tired that I didn't know what day it was. But you know what? Michael is a happy, healthy, wonderful person. And he somehow managed to survive to be very well balanced, even though he didn't go to those parties and even though he has that scar. I also make a lot of mistakes at work. I get things wrong. I take things in the wrong direction sometimes. I rush in. I don't always listen enough. And sometimes I need to get closer to the operational side of things. I ask my team to tell me when I'm wrong, and I encourage them to disagree with me and call me out in my mistakes. The other thing I didn't get for a very large part of my career was specific feedback. No one ever really told me what I did well, but essentially what I could do better. I'm a big fan of Kim Scott's book and podcast, Radical Candor, and I try to practice this with my teams. I believe that if you do care about someone, you will be honest with them about their strengths, but also give them specific feedback about the things they need to do better, and then help them to do it. I'm naturally a very risk-averse person, but I regularly challenge myself to do something that scares me. That's why I'm here doing this tonight. I grew up thinking that I wasn't very good at sport, so a lot of the challenges that I set myself involve sports, exercise, and trying to prove that belief wrong. These pictures represent me stepping out of my comfort zone. I am not a natural runner. I really don't have the traditional physique for it, but it makes me feel good, so I do it. In the picture on the right, I was running in a race and I had just emerged from an icy cold bog that, as a 5'1" person, had come up to my neck, and I literally had to swim through it. It was not fun. I'd like to say the picture in the middle is of me learning to dive, but I haven't quite conquered that fear yet, but it's on my list. The other picture of me is in the weight section of my gym. As women, we often don't like to go into the weight section because we feel intimidated. And also, we just don't really want to be looked at when we're working out. But I have forced myself to learn how to use all of those machines. And I can pretty much go into any gym anywhere and know how to use the equipment. Professionally, I still want to see more women having a go, taking a chance on applying for that job, even though they can only do 60% of what's on the job description. And if you don't get the job, an interview process is one of the best professional development exercises you can get. I am exactly where I am now because of all my failures, all the jobs I applied for and didn't get, and there have been quite a few. It's good to fail. This is not to say that that is easy. I have suffered from imposter syndrome at every stage of my career. This is an important one. If a female or a male colleague achieves something, tell them they are awesome. Don't assume they already know it. And remember to pat yourself on the back too. This is a picture of me and some of my children and colleagues from the King David Primary School, where I was head teacher for 4 years. As you can see, we were invited to meet the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street in recognition of our achievements at the school. And these quotes are from the Ofsted report when the school achieved a judgment of outstanding in 2016 under my leadership. Of course, this was a team effort, but I am so proud of the work we did and the vision that I set for that community. And most importantly, I'm proud of what this quote says about what we did for the children in our school and the subsequent lives we changed. Increasingly, I have come to understand that having downtime and recognizing what supports my mental health is crucial. These pictures represent some of the things I do to relax and support my mental health. The Zoom screenshot is from a charity workout that my husband and I led last Sunday to raise money for the refugee community where he works. 102 people joined the workout and we raised a massive 11,500 ringgit in a week, thanks to the generosity of the community. This money means that possibly 2 children from that community can now be sponsored to attend secondary school, something that they can't ordinarily afford to do, something that could change their life chances. Giving back and offering kindness to others is scientifically proven to support our mental health. The puppy pic was also taken last Sunday. That's going to be the new addition to our family in a few weeks' time, my therapy dog. And the picture on the right was another grueling 22-mile race up and down a mountain that my husband and I did to raise money for a child with Duchenne in a school where I was working at the time. So that's almost the end of my story tonight. This picture was taken in Thailand in 2019, in the heady days when we could still travel. I remember feeling very happy, fulfilled, and grateful on that day. On the advice of my professional coach, I have recently started to keep a gratitude journal. And for me, It's a useful reminder to not sweat the small stuff and appreciate the little joys in life, both personally and professionally, that are in actual fact the most important things. I try every night to list the things I'm grateful for from that day. And then I list what I call my redirections, the things that I want to try and do better the next day. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Monday, the 18th of January. Things I'm grateful for. Coffee. Working with a team of people I really like and feel psychologically safe with. Friends quiz breaks, something that we've started doing recently in our office when we're reaching cognitive overload. Being privileged enough to have my job. Running. Talking to Mikey and hearing him tell Paul that he remembers him reading The Count of Monte Cristo to him when he was 10 and he loved it and he's going to read it again. He sounds happy. Being invited to speak at Women Ed. Fresh air. Monkey babies, because there are quite a few near where I live. Puppies. Redirections, the things that I want to try and do better tomorrow. Listen more actively, talk less. Don't be so driven, it's not all about you. Stop worrying you're not good enough. This is also making it all about you. Put your phone away at 7 p.m. Seek accurate information before making a decision. It's okay to make people wait. Don't try to be perfect. Be positive with Paul. He's alone all day. Relax. Smile more, sigh less. Praise more. Breathe more. Say thank you more. And on that note, thank you for listening. And please do feel free to connect with me.
Thank you so much, Nicola. That was fantastic. What an inspirational way to start our Women Ed webinar series. And in response to your advice there, I'd like to tell you that you are awesome. That was fantastic. Having the courage to share in that way is really, really fantastic with a group of women that you've maybe not met personally. I'm sure that there's been something in your talk that we've all taken away. I've certainly made plenty of notes and I shall be reflecting on what I can do better from tomorrow as well.
Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you for the introduction, Bex, and thank you, Nicola. That was really inspiring, and I'm just so thrilled to be here. So thanks again to Bex and all the Women's Ed Malaysia team for the invite. My name's Melissa Bautista Turner. I'm the head of Key Stage 2 at the International School at Park City, and I'm really thrilled to have been invited today. I'm very nervous, but thrilled nonetheless. The theme that I've chosen for today is, let me share this, is being brave. And I'll be sharing my unfinished journey as a teacher, leader, and person, and how I've tried to be brave and rise above real and imagined hindrances to my own success and happiness. On the 16th of July, 2009, was my first official day as an expatriate teacher. I woke up that morning in my little studio flat in Bali, the island of the gods, the place that I would eventually call my home for 2 years. And Bali was and still is one of my favorite places, and I feel really fortunate for that chance to have worked there. But the night before, I arrived with 2 suitcases, a head full of adventures to be had, and a bunch of butterflies in my stomach. But that first morning in Jimbaran, with the birds chirping outside and the lovely incense wafting from our neighbors, or my neighbors next door balcony, I woke up alone. And I cried, and I couldn't stop crying actually for a couple of hours. And I couldn't tell you now what started it, but because Bali was familiar enough, I'd been there before, physically and linguistically, I knew I would do well. I was in jet lag, my job was about to start, in a few days' time, and my boyfriend then was going to join me in a few weeks. So it just dawned on me, I think, that here I was alone in a foreign country for the first time ever, away from my family, away from my friends, in a totally different, comfort zone, and having to start a new life from scratch, like a real adult. But I was 29 by then, so I wasn't even young, but I found it really, really overwhelming. And at that point, despite all the factors that I tried to align to contribute to me having the best time ever living and teaching in Bali, something that I'd literally, signed up for, I was almost paralyzed with worry. And years later, I've put that emotional moment down to just naivety and just underestimating the stress and the challenge of moving abroad and trying something completely new. I've had many points like that in my life as well as an adult, when I felt really passionate about something, I volunteered for it, I worked really hard, I've prepared as much as I could, but still I would hold myself back with anxiety. And in those situations, I know the psychological tendencies at play, but it's not always easy to overcome them, even if you know they're there. I've experienced imposter syndrome as well, thought suppression, design fixation, analysis paralysis. And sometimes it's even a combination of many of these. And moreover, the diversity of being me, Melissa, plays a part in everything I do, including the decisions I make. And by diversity, I mean the sum of all my parts, my nationality, who I am in my family and my social circle, my education, my religion, likes and dislikes, my skills, my weaknesses, how I look, my belief, and my value system. Now, there's one aspect of the Philippine culture that I'm going to share with you now, and you might be aware of it or you might not. But in the Philippines, children can and do live with their parents, even after they've been married or even had their own children. In fact, it's kind of encouraged. And in other cultures, that might seem strange. Adults living with their parents might be looked on with disapproval, or it might be seen as a sign of weakness, a lack of maturity or financial dependence. But in my country, parents want to spend as much time with their children for as long as they can. And the feeling is mutual, it's acceptable, and it's the norm. So when I myself firstly, bravely told my parents at 27, which I know is quite late, that I wanted to move to my own place, their reaction was like, as if I told them that I was going to disown them and I was going to move to Mars. They're both highly educated career people. And by then, they were still giving me an allowance because the teachers pay back home just didn't pay very much. And, the cars I drove were their cars. I still had a yaya, and a yaya in the Philippines is basically a maid that's assigned to you. So you think they'd be over the moon, right? That finally I was going to be independent and I was going to be out of their hair. But they just couldn't fathom why I would give up these comforts to, suffer and pay my own way and, do chores. So a year later, when I told them that I was actually going to leave the country, they thought I was like a baby, their baby, still about to go away to fend for myself and go to a foreign land. So it was so ironic that after I'd made a show of saying, I'm an adult now and I have made this decision, I've got this job, I'm gonna go to Bali. And when I did get to Bali, I pretty much got there and cried like a baby. So it's quite ironic. But then living in Bali was lovely, and don't get me wrong, I loved it there. But it wasn't without its challenges. I was also going through a process of self-discovery, learning and unlearning all the time. See, before I left Manila, I'd never cooked a proper meal by myself. And then suddenly I was here, roped in with my colleagues in a come dine with me competition that I obviously lost, right? But I was like cooking for this table of 4, and I just, these were the tangible hurdles. But then psychologically, I think the biggest challenge for me was to win the hearts and respect of my students, their parents, and my colleagues. I wanted to be valued and treated equally amongst my peers, being the only Filipino expatriate member of staff. So perhaps some of you are wondering, why did she think that way? She got the job, of course, they accepted her, of course, they would have, seen her as an equal. And perhaps that was true. But when you're someone like me, who has grown up in a country that was colonized for 333 years by the Spanish, 46 by the United States, not even counting the 6 or so years that we were under the control of the Japanese and the Brits, things seem a little bit different. And by no means, by the way, you might have Filipino friends or Filipino family, I'm not suggesting at all that every Filipino thinks the way I do. But there is something that I personally had to overcome, and it's called colonial mentality. Now, colonial mentality is defined by Wikipedia as the internalized attitude of an ethnic or cultural inferiority felt by a people as a result of colonization or them being colonized by another group. It corresponds with the belief that the cultural values of the colonizer are inherently superior to one's own. And it's a really tricky mindset or behavioral pattern that causes really negative subconscious and conscious decisions and actions. Colonial mentality is like living in a paradox and being in constant conflict and just contradiction with yourself. It's something that I personally needed to be aware of in myself and bravely accept to be able to transcend. And I know I've still got further to go. And Said Zabala says it more succinctly, actually, that she said that if you're a woke Pinoy, which is a term for Filipinos, or any other colonized race for that matter, you can relate to how challenging it can be to maintain the right amount of national pride so that it doesn't become blind fanatical nationalism, but it also doesn't regress into internalized racism. So when I began my journey as an expatriate teacher, I was proud to be Filipino and the only Filipino in my school. Yet funnily, I didn't want people or others to see or define me immediately as a Filipino. Somehow I wanted to create this distinction between myself and a typical person from my own country. And in conversations with others, I would feel really offended with anyone if they made a critical comment about just Asians in general. Yet in myself, in my heart, and in my own head, I would also find myself framing others within their ethnic stereotypes. And by this point, by the way, I was already a qualified, experienced, and licensed teacher from the Philippines. Yet I felt the need to do a postgraduate certificate of education, also known as a PGCE, via distance learning with the University of Sunderland. So if you're not familiar with a PGCE, it's basically a widely recognized teaching qualification from the UK, often considered the gold standard in British international schools. And there is no doubt that having a PGCE has helped me become a better teacher, understand the UK curriculum, and ultimately pave the way for new opportunities. And publicly, those were the motivations I would talk about. But the truth was, in my own head, I wanted to be better than just a Filipino teacher. So in my heart and in my own pursuit of equality, I was hypocritically wanting to feel superior to others. And I think that's the one regret that I have in my career as a teacher. It's the point that I surmised that another country's standards were better than my own. This is despite my awareness that, there's millions of Filipinos all over the world, talented Filipinos, living, as leaders and are valued employed in their professions. And yes, there are some of us who by some bureaucratic reason are called workers rather than expats, but it has nothing to do with their passport or the situation they were born in. And for many developing countries like my own, these inequalities stem from the lottery of privilege and the curse of overpopulation. When there is a glut of qualified professionals, but limited opportunities in such a small country, everyone is just in this race to develop skills for jobs that are either scarce or undervalued. So it's logical to seek opportunities elsewhere. And if you think about that, it's not that dissimilar to why many of us are here and have chosen to work abroad or sought an international or overseas education. The fact that individuals are able to take that brave step towards bettering their own lives, whoever they are, wherever they choose to go, should be applauded just as much as the next person. So here in KL, I feel really privileged to be able to work at a school that celebrates diversity. We have 50 nationalities in the student body, 10 nationalities within our staff. But despite this, now and again, I feel like although we've got this sense of inclusivity and belonging, I know that more can be done and more courage is needed, not necessarily by the Board of Governors or the senior leadership team, but everyone else as individuals. Because I really believe that in schools and in business, if we want positive change, improve collegiality, energize the workplace, we as a team have to actively and bravely champion diversity, inclusivity, and an authentic sense of belonging. And luckily, this is a developing trend. You see more and more employers increasingly seeking to create diverse workforces and workplaces, and they're beginning to appreciate the benefits that this brings. But I think that's just the start, and change will not really happen unless us as leaders and colleagues within that group really embrace and value and be mindful of each other's cultural identity. And I know that's easier said than done, because all of us bring our own diversity wherever we go. So the challenge, I think, is to be brave and call ourselves out when our own ethnocentricity is kicking in a negative way. So ethnocentricity means you're using your own culture as the center and evaluate other cultures based on what you think you know or what you think is right. And before making any judgments or actions, remember that there is also a phenomenon called cultural relativism, whereby how one perceives culture, either their own or another person's, can be very different to how another person from another culture sees it. So, the next time you set up a meeting, or maybe you're a participant in a meeting, I challenge you to be brave and sit back and allow more of your colleagues to maybe have a voice this time. And while this is happening, observe who are the people who are vocal, which members are the quiet ones, who are the ones who are willing to take risks, who are the ones who are happy to just support. And be honest with yourself and reflect. Are you making judgments, positive and negative, because of a learned stereotype? Or are you taking one individual as a sum of all their parts? And with that knowledge, you start thinking about how you, as a leader or as a colleague, can get to know these people better, find out what motivates them, find out how you can, what holds them back as well, and see how you can empower them to be brave. In this way, you hopefully will bring out the best in them, make them feel valued, make them feel seen. And this is the only way that true collaboration and a sense of belonging can take place. As teachers, and I don't really mean to be patronizing, and I know all of us, as teachers, as educators, we want the best for our children. But I think it's so important to be mindful of our role in the lives of these children for now and in the future. I mean, some of us might teach a national or international, in a national or international school, and each one will be unique in its curriculum, its demographic, and its mission and vision. And although it's really hard to pin down a common definition of international education, perhaps we can agree instead on the aspirations. And I really love how Skelton et al. Talked about international education as a goal rather than a concept. And if we are to be true advocates of international mindedness and education, we really need to be brave and challenge our own ideologies. Our goal should not be to create adults in our own image, hewn against our own personal preconceived beliefs and what is acceptable and unacceptable, what's right and wrong, because ultimately these impressionable minds, in our classrooms are individuals, and they have their own lives. They will traverse their own lives and make meaning of this world within their own culture. And if they don't know themselves, they don't have a good grasp of their own identities and strengths, then how can they be brave for themselves? So I think we need to think carefully and have the courage to question our motives and always ask ourselves, when we're teaching, what values do we teach? And hopefully we will decide on those that are universal and promote tolerance and kindness. Which version of history should we explore? Ideally, it's obviously factual and relevant, but not one-sided. Which type of literature should you cover? Let's be as inclusive as possible and celebrate the rich tapestry of texts that the world has to offer. As teachers, we always tell students that they should be brave and work with perseverance and passion, and they can be whoever they want to be. You know, the world is full of opportunity for everyone, no matter their gender, their creed, their nationality, or their ethnicity, and that they can achieve anything they want or be anyone they want to be. But I think they need to see that with their own eyes. And the only way you can do that is to have a varied array of brave role models in their lives. So now fast forward to my 21st year of teaching, and being brave hasn't been easy. But so far, I think it's paid off. So I've worked in 3 countries, each time being brave enough to acknowledge that moving up in my career is what I want to do, and leaving my comfort zone or a country that's really nice and comfortable is, you know, sometimes the only way forwards. I've had lots of a variety of responsibilities and positions, and whilst I bravely went for these promotions, I equally needed to, you know, have a word with myself before I went for these and be ready not to get the job, which also takes honesty and courage. And I think as a result, you know, I've been a few things. I've coordinated art, coordinated maths. I've been head of years 2 and 4. I've been head of Key Stage 1, and now I'm head of Key Stage 2. Initially in the Philippines, I trained and worked as an early years teacher, but being brave has meant that I've now taught all primary ages from nursery to year 6. I've been an EAL teacher to both children and adults. When I was younger, my friends back home, you know, we banded together. We put up this tutorial center, which ended up being like really successful, and I was managing it remotely. I've taken a PGCE and a master's from the University of Sunderland. Both of them were self-funded, and they were 2 of the most, you know, challenging things I've ever done in my life, because I had to do them with a full-time job as well. So slowly, throughout the years, I felt braver, taken more risks, literally shed a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, had a number of tricky conversations with myself. But in the process, I got to know myself better. And as a leader, I try to be brave every day for my team. And, you know, I hope, you know, they can feel that as well. Sometimes I do it by, you know, seeking authentic reasons to praise them for a job well done. Often it's to give my time and energy to them so that they can pursue projects they believe in. Occasionally, it's to challenge them to think beyond themselves and look at the bigger picture. I also try to be brave for my students. I show up every day. I teach lessons the best I can. I make my classroom the safest, most inclusive, most dynamic place possible. And I constantly challenge them as well to take risks and look and believe in themselves. And tonight, I feel like I was brave tonight because I was very nervous as well, obviously speaking on this platform. But it was something new and an exciting opportunity for personal development and to connect with you all. So I hope that by being brave and honest and sharing my journey with you, I've also encouraged you to think about how you can take risks and be brave in the path that you've chosen. And my wish is that collectively and individually, we can slowly but surely learn more about ourselves, connect with each other in a really authentic and meaningful way, and be brave enough to be the best ambassadors for ourselves and for our own cultures, wherever we're from. And this way we can break barriers and negative stereotypes, not just for ourselves now, but the generations to come. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you. I think that once again, you've really set the scene for what we're trying to achieve here. So much of what you've said has resonated with us. We're not all educators here. We're not all about just education. And what you've shared there has between our colleagues that are, because it's crackly, I'm sorry, our colleagues that are here, Malaysian, who have welcomed us into their country, and also the morals and the values that we bring with us. And it's so important that we recognise and acknowledge the differences between us all. And I think what ties it really nicely together is exactly that's what we're trying to achieve with our Women Ed Network. This isn't a feminist or a political platform. This is a chance for us to bridge the community of our international and national colleagues so that we can learn from each other and get the best ideas from each other, collaborate with each other and support each other. So you've really set the stage well for that. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Nicola, as well. Again, feel free to put some comments in the chat box by all means. As I say, Melissa and Nicola can both see them. Just before we end, ladies, my co-hosts, did you see any questions that came up that maybe we would like to share? Katie?
Somebody was asking if, Nicola, you use a gratitude diary, or if you just write in a notebook, or how you, you know, how you record your things. She's showing us here. Tell us what you use.
It's actually a really nice notebook. So it's a particularly nice notebook to write in, but you can see it's just got my writing in it. So it's just an ordinary notebook. That's all you need.
And everybody knows that teachers love stationery.
Absolutely.
There you go, an opportunity to go and buy nice stationery to use.
Melissa, I also saw somebody asked about you getting an international teaching degree here. Was it here in Malaysia? Where did you do it, Mel?
I did it via Sunderland University, so it's totally distance learning, and yeah, it's not just the University of Sunderland doing it as well. There's quite a few, and I think even in Malaysia, the Nottingham University also do one as well. But if you take it from the one here, I believe you can have a mixed kind of media sort of approach. You can go on campus, probably not now, but you know, it can be both of them. But yeah, I'm happy to share, you know, connect with me, and I'm happy to share more information.
Thank you. Well, thank you both, ladies. I've got the information here. I've got two things just before we finish. One is I'd like to just share our next two webinar sessions with you, just so you can see. We've got all the titles in now. Sorry, I'll just present that there. So we've got next week, same time, we've got 3 speakers. We've got Harsha, Cheryl Ann and Amy, and we'll be sharing more about their talks on our Twitter, Instagram and Facebook platforms. But they will be each talking next Wednesday, same time. You can get tickets in exactly the same way if you haven't signed up yet. And then the following Wednesday, which is our last one, we have Susanna, who's actually here with us this evening. Hi, Susanna. We've got Dr. Hartini and Adobe, who are sharing, again, 3 very different stories. And I hope that you will find them interesting and be able to sign up and join these sessions.